Hey guys, Akimbo Chris back out here on the range again today. And today guys, we are talking about the AR-15, America's rifle. The rifle that you buy to look tactical, to feel like a badass Navy SEAL. The Lego of the gun community. You can essentially build these rifles into almost anything. So that's kind of the topic of discussion today guys, is do you need an expensive AR-15? And I'm willing to say that the answer for most of you is probably not. I mean, there's definitely some use cases for an expensive AR-15. We're gonna go through some of the pros and cons of some of the drawbacks you might get with the cheaper AR-15 versus, you know, the reasons that you might go for a more expensive AR-15. So I brought out here today, guys, one of my budget, quote unquote, AR-15s. And the reason I say budget with quotations is because, you know, at the end of the day, the base of this gun, the upper receiver, the lower receiver, is budget oriented. However, you know, over time, you throw a new bolt carrier group in it, you throw a new buffer in it, you throw a muzzle device on it, a nice optic, and then, you know, at that point, you're probably well over, you know, $1,000. But we do have this out here today. This is a Palmetto State Armory build. This is a 10.5 inch AR pistol ATF, so calm down. We do have the pistol brace on here. This is a 10.5 inch, but this is something that I built a while back and something that I shoot a lot. I bring this out on the range at least once or twice a month and put rounds to it, and it has treated me very well. It's one of my favorite guns just to bring out and plink with and take to the range and train with. It's just super fun to shoot. The 10.5 inch barrel, you know, shoots some really big fireballs. So when you take this thing to the range, it's just a blast. And I mean that in every way possible, because this is literally a blast can. But first I want to talk about why I like the AR-15 and why I choose the AR-15 for my tactical kind of go-to do-all rifle, right? Over something like the AK-47. There's a lot of debates online, you know, AK versus the AR-15. Look, I've owned a lot of AK-47s. I have built a lot of AKs, different variants from different manufacturers. Had some import ones. I've had a few Palmetto State Armory ones. I've had the AKV. So you know, I'm not opposed to the AK. However, when it comes to you buying a one-stop do-all tactical rifle, I think the AR-15 has become such a much better option for most people. And the reason I say that is because the accessibility and the affordability of these guns. There are many manufacturers out there now where you can get a inexpensive AR-15 for a decent price, well under $1,000. You know, you have Smith & Wesson with their M&P Sport models. I know they just came out with a new Sport 3, I believe. You've got Springfield with their St. Victor line, which is a pretty good quality AR-15 they seem to run. You got Ruger with their Ruger 5.56, and then you also got, you know, Palmetto State Armory, which may even be one of the cheapest options on the list, but definitely something that you can build into a quality rifle. Now, with the AK-47, I have bought many of them, and I've set many of them up different ways. Some had wood furniture, some were more traditional, and then some I wanted to set up to be tactical. I always kind of end up wanting to go back to the tactical style firearm, you know, so I can put a nice optic on there, put a flashlight and a laser. And what I'll say is, you know, the tides had really turned. Because back in the day, the AK was an inexpensive platform. You know, the ammo was cheap, the guns were cheap, and it made more sense. Now with AKs being through the roof in price, most of the time for the quality ones, well over $1,000, you know, it's just not as viable as it used to be. Especially when you want to set them up to be more of a tactical style firearm. A lot of times they don't come with a nice rail on them, or they may come with like a fixed stock or something like that, and you want to set it up for you. It's going to cost you a lot more money to do that, because the rails on those guns are a lot more expensive. Usually for a decent quality rail, you're looking at $300 or so to be able to mount an optic. For the furniture, it's more expensive, and overall setting the gun up to put an optic on it, you know, you're going to be paying a lot more money. So with AR-15, these things are so widely available now that the parts are super inexpensive depending on what you want to go with, depending on what your platform is, or you know, why you're using that rifle. So I do think that's what really makes the AR-15 the most viable option now, is you can get the base gun you know, you can get some quality options for $600-700, and then you can upgrade them the way you want to. Even when it comes to the internals, if AR-15 breaks, mostly every part on this firearm is serviceable. With an AK-47, if something happens and you have a catastrophic failure, you know, maybe a round blows up in the chamber or something and cracks your bolt, then you're pretty much out of luck. Because the way ARs work is you can literally buy another bolt carrier group and you can drop them in these guns, which is basically the heart of the firearm. So you can buy another bolt carrier group and just drop it in there, and you know, you're good to go again if something happens to your bolt carrier group. With an AK-47, all AK-47s are fitted to that specific gun. So there's a lot of head spacing involved and a lot of you know, gunsmithing that would need to be redone on an AK-47 if you were going to put a new bolt or something like that in it, because each bolt is fit directly to the chamber. Now, with that being said, I know there's going to be some argument out there that AKs probably fail less than ARs do in terms of like their bolts and stuff, because most of them are forged. However, I like the option to be able to customize my gun 100%. So as much as I used to be the AK guy, I used to be the guy who said I don't like AR-15s and AKs are just way better because they're just funner to shoot and the ammo is cheaper. I mean, like Nardo Wick said, it's literally like shooting lug nuts at very, very high speeds, right? So, you know, AKs are very, very fun. I used to be an AK guy. However, over the years, as the prices have increased, they've gotten more expensive, harder to get. Ammo has went up pretty much through the roof. A lot of times now it's more expensive than 5.56. The AR is now the platform of my go-to to build out a tactical rifle. Like I said, this is a Palmetto State Armory build. I'm gonna kind of go through some of the things that I do have on here, some of the things I do have done on this gun. I'm not gonna go into heavy detail because at the end of the day, like I said, you can kind of build these into whatever you want. So it's really up to you and your use case of what you put on your firearm. So just starting out with it, on this gun, we do have an upgraded bolt carrier group in this gun. That is one thing that I would recommend on replacing on any cheaper AR-15s. This is basically the heart of the gun. This is what's cycling the gun. This is what's ejecting the shells. This is what's pushing your next shell into the chamber. So essentially, on most cheaper AR-15s, what I see go first is usually the bolt carrier group. Usually it's the gas rings. I've seen in some worst cases on some of the really cheap AR-15s, the bolt will crack. So I would recommend, if you do buy a cheaper AR-15 and when you do decide you want to do some upgrades, the first thing that you do is you replace the bolt carrier group. Now the bolt carrier group in this one is a WMD bolt carrier group. They make really, really solid bolt carrier groups, and it is a nickel boron bolt carrier group. So it's got that nice coating on it, so you get that real smooth action whenever you charge the weapon. Next thing is definitely a charging handle. I'd recommend getting an ambidextrous charging handle. You don't want to be in a situation, if you are going to use this gun for self-defense or home defense or anything like that, or a bump in the night situation, if something happens to one of your hands, God forbid, and you can't charge the gun with the other hand because you didn't opt in for the upgraded charging handle, then it's going to be $100 that you wish you probably have spent. What we also have on here, we do have a primary arms optic. This is a 1X SLX prism optic. These optics are very, very cool. These are basically like mini scopes. So if you think about something like the Trijicon ACOG series, it's something very, very similar to that. But this is a 1X, so it's almost like looking through an LPVO that is on 1X. So it's super clear, and it's much different than a red dot because you do have an etched reticle that is red. However, it is much clearer than a red dot. You don't get that fuzzy look from a red dot or emitter because it's etched into the scope. So in a shit hits the fan situation, for example, something like this would probably be a lot better than a red dot because you're not relying on the batteries for it to work. If the batteries do run out of this, you won't get any illumination, but you'll still have a sketched reticle in that optic, so it will still work. It works just like a scope, but it kind of works like a red dot in terms of eye relief and you know, target acquisition. We do also have a Somo Gear PEC 15 on here. I do some night vision shooting occasionally, and this is the rifle I usually take for my night vision shooting. It's short, it's easy to haul around, it's a 10.5 inch, so it just works. Somo Gear is very popular in like the budget-oriented like prepper night vision community because it does have a working IR illuminator and IR laser. So far, I put hundreds of rounds to this gun, and it still holds 0 to this day. So, you know, I don't have any issues with it. Next, we do have a little light here. This is a SureFire M600 clone. What I will say is if you own a lot of firearms and a lot of different ARs, you know, these little SureFire clones that you can get online are pretty decent. I haven't had any issues with them. Like I said, I put hundreds of rounds to this gun, and look, I do have some Streamlights and some SureFires on my other guns, but you don't want to spend $350 for every single gun that you have in your safe, right? And these SureFire clones are almost 1-to-1 of the real deal, and they really work very, very similarly. The thing about these is you can literally swap these out with SureFire parts. So you can put a SureFire aftermarket head on it and a SureFire end cap, and it works great. And the battery life is excellent. Don't have any issues. Next, we do have the muzzle device. We do have a SureFire Warden on here, which is a blast mitigator, and it goes over the 3-prong SureFire War Comp. And the reason I have that on there is also for night vision shooting. Whenever we are shooting under night vision, you know, I try to make sure that my blast is deflected forward. That way it kind of lights up my path of what I'm shooting at, as opposed to it flashing up in my face. So that's one reason I have it. Another reason is a blast mitigator is really good for prone shooting. So if you do a lot of drills and training with these things, you know, getting on the ground, proning and things like that, then, you know, what this will do is it will keep the dust from getting all up in your eyes and your face and things like that. It's gonna push all that dust and that dirt that's in front of you forward, so it really, really helps. We do also have a aftermarket trigger in here. This is just a road trigger. I think this is like a $100 trigger. It's a 3.5 pound trigger, nothing crazy, flat face, it works well. Not as good as the other trigger that I have in my other AR, but it works. And that's the thing about AR parts, like they're so accessible that you can pretty much buy almost any 3.5 pound trigger and stick an AR, and it's a big upgrade. So guys, we're gonna do some shooting out here today with this AR, and we're just gonna talk about, you know, a budget AR versus an expensive AR, what the use cases may be for an expensive AR, and you know, what AR you should probably get if you're buying your first AR-15 or you're buying another AR-15. Are the $2,000 ARs a significant upgrade over the $500, $600, $700 ARs? Well, today we're gonna kind of talk through that, and I'm gonna let you guys really decide, because at the end of the day, it is personal preference, but I'm gonna give you my take on it. All right, guys, we're gonna do a Mozambique drill, but we're gonna do 2 of them. So kind of like a double Mozambique. So we got 2 targets down here, one on the left, one on the right. So I'm gonna take 2 shots center mass on the first one, then try to attempt a headshot, 2 shots on the center mass on the second one, and attempt a headshot. And obviously, guys, we're not far at all from the target here, literally a few yards, but this is like a self-defense scenario. All right, so we did a Mozambique, which is 2 to the body, 2 center mass, 1 to the head. So as you can see here, hit here, hit here, hit here, and then on that one over here, we've got 1 hit, and 1 hit right here in the neck. So with that being said, I train with my AR maybe, like I said, twice a month. I bring it out on the range, maybe put 100 rounds to it a month. And my whole point with this is that when you're talking about buying expensive AR-15, you really need to analyze what kind of training you're gonna do. If you're not shooting out past 200-300 yards on the regular, or you don't have the intention of shooting out past 200 or 300 yards on the regular, which I think most people don't, right? It's even hard to find ranges that are that far, at least around where I live. And I'm in the South, so you know, maybe that's not the case for everybody, but here, most ranges are really like maxed out at 100 yards. So if that's most of the shooting you're gonna be able to do, then I don't know if it makes sense to buy an expensive AR-15, right? If accuracy is something you're looking for, if accuracy is a reason that you're looking at expensive AR-15, then maybe you should consider a cheaper AR-15 if you're only shooting under 300 yards, you know, regularly. And the reason I say that is because with these cheaper AR-15s, it's very, very unlikely, especially if it's your first one, that you're gonna be able to outshoot the gun. Point being, you know, I train pretty often, but you know, obviously here I didn't do great, but also we're standing close enough to where my sight is height over bore, so it's gonna shoot a little bit low. However, my point being, like underneath 100 yards, underneath even 200 yards, with even a cheaper AR-15, you're not really gonna be able to outshoot it. Now with the more expensive AR-15s, we can start to get into like the barrel profile, what type of barrel they have on them. So most of your cheaper AR-15s just have like a chrome line barrel, with your more expensive ones having either a hammer forged barrel or a match grade barrel. So the match grade barrel would be the one that you really want for like pinpoint accuracy. Maybe you get something like a 223 Wild barrel or something like that, that you know is just super tight tolerances for that accuracy. So if you're not really shooting past, you know, 250, 300 yards on the regular, you're not doing, you know, marksman style shooting on the regular, then, you know, if we're looking at accuracy, a lot of the times you're not going to be able to outshoot the gun. You just won't be able to outshoot the firearm.
Shooter ready. Stand by. Beep.
All right, so it looks like we got one pretty close to the bullseye here. That second shot, I pulled it slightly right off. Okay, that's shooter error. Like I said, if this is your first AR-15 that you're buying, you know, you'll probably shoot very similar to me, right? I'm not a combat veteran. I don't see combat. I train every once in a while with my AR, and that's about it, right? We did hit the target, so that's pretty good. This is a pretty small target, that distance. I mean, this is basically the size of like a head, I guess you could say. And then here we got closer again, but we did pull one right off the shoulder. So you just got to straighten it up. But what I will say is I don't think it would necessarily make a difference, even if I had a $1,500 AR and I was shooting it like that at this distance, because I do have a decent trigger in here. I do have a upgraded buffer in here. We do have a captured buffer in here, which is another thing that I would recommend upgrading if you do get a cheaper AR-15, is the buffer, right? You do get, you know, a spring and a weight on your buffer, which a lot of times makes for a super noisy action. If you want that smooth action that you would get with something like a more expensive AR-15, then, you know, you can upgrade your buffer and your bolt carrier group. Like I said, get something with a nice coating like this. It has that nickel boron coating on it, so it makes it super smooth in the action. And then if you get something like this Armaspec captured buffer, it takes out all of the spring noise, and it makes the recoil sensation very, very light. So this gun does shoot very, very good for it being a budget oriented option. So I will say that. I think that's like one of the main things when you buy a more expensive AR-15, is that a lot of them are going to come with these upgrades already, right? They're going to come with a nicer bolt carrier group. They're going to come with a nicer buffer. They're going to come with a nicer trigger. They may come with a better looking rail or a nicer rail. So, you know, these are things that you can upgrade yourself though. So if you are on a budget, a lot of times those are the things that you're paying for in a more expensive AR-15. Not all the time, and we'll get into some of the other differences as well, like we did talk about the barrels, but a lot of times you're going to be paying for that furniture that's already installed, that buffer, and maybe a rail or a muzzle device. But these are all things that you can upgrade on your own. So if you're one of these people who you're trying to build a sporting rifle or a target gun or a home defense rifle, and you want to set it up a certain way, and maybe you don't like the way that those guns are set up and you want to change things on them, you know, straight out the box, then maybe it makes more sense to go for a slightly cheaper AR-15 since you're going to upgrade it anyway.
Shooter ready. Stand by. Beep. Shooter ready. Stand by. Beep.
Yeah, we're ringing that still. So yeah, I took 2 shots there, then I ran up, slowed down a little bit, took 2 shots here. Looks like we threw one again. Unfortunately, I'm just bad at it, throwing them. We did hit the still target both times though. That's good. This is basically like a headshot at that distance, so that is pretty good. And then here, seems like we did pull another one. We actually got a little bit closer, so that's not bad. So really just finishing up on the accuracy portion, talking about accuracy. When you're out here doing drills and you're shooting at maybe 50 yards, 60 yards, mostly, I mean, you're not going to be able to outshoot the firearm, right? And I mean, you can train and you can get a lot better than me, don't get me wrong. But at this distance, I mean, you're shooting straight, right? It's really when you get past that, you know, 300 yard mark when you really got to have those sub MOA groupings. is when you would need like a match grade barrel or something like that. So the cheaper ARs for generally for like a sporting rifle or even in like a home defense scenario, a lot of these will work. You know, accuracy is not bad with these at most distances that most people would be shooting with. So let's talk about another reason you may need a more expensive AR-15. So if you're in some type of combat role or something like that, or maybe you have a license to where you can have a fully automatic machine gun and you want a fully automatic AR-15, then obviously I think in that case it makes sense to get a more expensive AR-15. One of the things that you'll see with, like I said, when we're talking about barrels versus something like a chrome line barrel versus a hammer forge or something like that, where that hammer forge barrel is really going to come in place is with a lot of like full auto fast fire, because the thing that kills guns is heat, right? We talked about the bolt carrier groups earlier being one of the weak points of some of the cheaper AR-15s, which is completely upgradable, and you know, you can do this in 2 seconds. The barrel you can change out as well. However, you know, it's a lot more extensive than just pulling out the bolt carrier group. So maybe not for the inexperienced to install a barrel. So maybe that's something you would buy a more expensive AR-15 for, is to make sure that you have that hammer forged barrel, because when you're putting a lot of lead down range super fast with full auto fire and you're heating up that barrel, that's generally what will wear the barrels the most over time. But generally speaking, if you're an average shooter like myself, you shoot once or twice a month, you know, you maybe put 100 rounds down range a month, it's going to be very hard for you to shoot out this barrel. I know a lot of people who have Smith & Wesson M&P Sport 2s and Springfield St. Victors and things like that, who have put thousands of rounds down them and they still shoot very accurately. It's usually when you're putting a lot of rounds down range with an FRT, or maybe it's a fully automatic firearm, where you're just really heating up that barrel, where you might want to get a more expensive AR-15. The same if you're training very extensively, if you're training 3-4 days a week for a combat role or something like that. I mean, I don't know what that would entail, but if you're doing something like that and you're putting a whole bunch of rounds down range in a small amount of time, really heating up that barrel, then in that case I would say maybe you'd want to go with a more expensive AR-15. If you're using it mainly as a sporting rifle or a home defense gun, you pick it up every once in a while and shoot and train with it, then something like this can definitely do you good. And what I will say is, I think, and I know a lot of YouTubers say this is maybe a little bit overdone, but especially if you're new and this is your only AR-15, then I would say instead of you buying that $2,000 AR-15 and only buying 100 rounds of ammo, buy 500 rounds of ammo, get the cheaper AR, upgrade the bolt carrier group, put your nice optic on there, and have you a platform that you can use along with the ammo that you can train with to get better with that gun. Because overall, that's what's really going to make the difference. At this range, with my shooting ability, I don't know if I would shoot any better with a $1,500 or $2,000 AR. I've owned some very expensive ARs. So, you know, overall, it's very hard to tell a difference once you trick it out and you customize it and you put your own stuff in it. If there's a gun out there that has the furniture you want on it, it has the trigger you want in it, you like the rail and everything, then it's probably worth going ahead and buying that one for the extra money, because you're probably going to spend that money on the cheaper one anyway. However, if you're on a really tight budget and you're looking for a gun just to do its job, then these inexpensive AR-15s are not bad. I think one of the biggest things when it comes to talking about a platform and its viability is the reliability. And I think that something that may be misconstrued online sometimes is that the cheaper ARs aren't as reliable, which just is not true. The cheaper ARs are very reliable. It's very hard nowadays to make a bad AR-15. I mean, you even got the Omni AR-15s. I've watched many reviews on those, and even those seem to do pretty good. If you watch some of Iraq Veteran 8888's burn downs and some of Garantham's burn downs on a lot of these rifles, they last a good period of time under fully automatic fire until something like the gas tube catches on fire and just burns the rail off. But overall, I mean, that's the first failure point, and that's going to be your failure point in many AR-15s, not just the cheaper ones. So when we talk about reliability, which is what we're about to get into here in a second, when I'm going to run like 3 or 4 drills back to back just to see if we can get the gun to malfunction. I think that it's important to mention that if you're looking for something that just works, something that shoots straight, a cheaper AR-15 will probably do you justice. You don't necessarily need a Daniel defense for that.
Shooter ready. Stand by. Beep.
That was kind of sloppy. I'm not happy with that, but whatever. I mean, we got all shots on target though. Hold on, make sure we're... Alright, yep, we're good. We're all good. Alright, give it to me.
Shooter ready. Stand by. Beep.
Alright, so we were able to ring the gong a few times. We did take another shot at the head, so I placed one right here. Scenes overall, I'm shooting a little bit low. We put some more shots here in the center and then took out our target on this side as well. It looks like these two right here may be new. So we're getting pretty close to center mass. Alright, now guys, we're just gonna run it fast to see if we can't get this thing to choke up. How fast can we run a budget AR-15? A lot of the speed in these guns comes from the bolt carrier group and the buffer that you run in them, along with the trigger. If you have a super lightweight trigger, which you can get very cheap for an AR-15, usually around 100 to 120 bucks. If you want something that's like a really good trigger, then you're probably going to be spending upwards of $200, $250 for something like a Timney or something like that. All right, so we got through those two mags, no malfunctions, but we're gonna keep running it here today. We did ring this quite a few times. To be honest with you, with the flash of this damn thing, I don't know how many times I hit it and how many times I didn't. I was just kind of spamming the trigger a little bit on it. But we did get some shots here. I pulled quite a few of them. We did get a neck shot there, but yeah, I did pull quite a few of them. We're gonna tighten this up though, I promise guys, we're gonna tighten this up. Here we took some shots as well. These were a little bit tighter. So yeah, I mean, you could definitely run these things pretty quick, but we're gonna speed it up even a little bit more. Let's see if we can get this thing to malfunction. All right guys, now look, I'm not saying there's no benefit to buying the more expensive AR-15s, right? Let's talk about QC. Now, I think we can all agree that we know that the more expensive AR-15s, things like Daniel Defense and things like that, are gonna have better QC. Right, these are more mass manufactured firearms. A lot of the cheaper ones are more mass manufactured, like mil-spec firearms, usually using stamped materials and things like that, built in factories. So the QC is definitely going to be, you know, different than something like a $2,000 AR. So if you are looking at a budget AR-15 and you have decided, you know, that's what you can afford and that's what you're gonna get, then I would recommend just analyzing the company that you're buying from. A company like PSA that has excellent customer service is really something that you want when you're buying a cheaper AR-15, right? Because if we acknowledge that the QC may not be the same, and it isn't the same as some of the $2,000 ARs, the Daniel Defenses, things like that, that, you know, you may run into QC issues, right? You may have some type of issue with the rifle, something didn't get torqued down properly, or maybe the gas system's messed up or something like that. Then in those cases, you want to make sure that you're buying from a company where you can pick up the phone and you can call the customer service and easily put in a ticket to have it serviced through warranty. Now, PSA has warranty on most of their firearms, and their customer service team is absolutely great. I've had to deal with them before on my PSA AKV, the 9mm AK, but it was very easy. They put in a warranty ticket, you ship the gun to them, and they ship it back to you as soon as they can. So when you're buying a cheaper AR-15, it's very important to, one, buy from a reputable company, and two, I would say research the specific firearm that you're buying from. All right, so we got some shots in the head here. Just spamming up, you know, obviously that recoil kind of travels the gun up a little bit when you're blasting like that. So we got some shots here, got some shots here. We hit the gong a few times. Yeah, I mean, you can run this pretty fast. I would say the downfall to this gun to running it super fast, my other AR-15, I have a velocity stack 3-pound trigger in it, and you can run that thing crazy quick because the trigger is just so light.
Shooter ready. Stand by. Beep. Shooter ready. Stand by. Beep.
All right.
Shooter ready. Stand by. Beep.
I try to go for all headshots. I think it was a little bit low. Yeah, it was a little bit low. Just when I get real close with this sight, it's sighted in for about 50 yards or so. So it's a little bit low when I'm shooting up that close.
Shooter ready. Stand by. Beep.
All right, let's close this out. So, what is my general consensus on, do you need an expensive AR-15? Well, my answer would be for most people, probably not. Like I said, if you're not shooting out past 300 yards consistently and doing some marksman style shooting with the AR platform, then you probably don't need a super expensive AR-15. Or if you're not in a combat role where you're putting a whole bunch of full auto rounds down range and things like that, or you're just shooting it very, very frequently, then probably not. If you're like me and you shoot at paper in the backyard most of the time, and you maybe put 100 to 200 rounds through it a month, this gun will probably outlast you. Now, with that being said, like I said, I do think there are some things that you definitely need to switch out when you first get these to ensure that they will be reliable, especially if you're going to, take it for a home defense situation or a civil unrest or shit hits the fan situation. You're definitely going to want to make sure you change out the internals on the gun just to make sure that you do have a gun that can function for 5,000 plus rounds, because the number one failure point I see in some of the cheaper ARs is that bolt carrier group is usually the first to go around the 5,000 to 6,000 mark range. However, this is a serviceable item in the AR-15, and this is not to say that even in the more expensive AR-15s that you shouldn't service your bolt carrier group around 5,000 or 6,000 rounds. That's usually the time frame you'll see the degradation of the bolt carrier group. I would definitely just recommend sticking a really good quality bolt carrier group in there to smooth out the action and things like that. Get you a nice trigger, and you can really build these rifles out to be something a lot more serious than just a plinker. So I would say for most people, you probably don't need a $2,000 Daniel Defense AR-15 unless you're in the military, unless you're shooting at marksman distances and a sub-MOA group really matters or make the difference. But for something like home defense, you don't need to be shooting sub-MOA. You're not trying to shoot buttons off of people's shirts. So overall, I would say, it really depends on your use case. There's definitely a benefit to buying them. However, most people could probably get away with buying something like this, and I think the general consensus that these guns are just garbage and that they don't run or they're unreliable is just not true, because you can buy one of these guns and you can put 5,000 rounds through them and probably have no malfunctions. I have had a Smith & Wesson M&P Sport 2 before I had this rifle. I sold it a little while back, and I'm sure I had 2,000 or 3,000 rounds to that rifle, and I never had a single malfunction. So when we're talking about reliability and just having something overall that works and will do its job and do what it's intended to do in those situations, then you can definitely get away with some of the cheaper AR-15s. The one place I would say I wouldn't skimp on is, an optic. Making sure you have a nice optic, because we all know that optics are not made equally, and if you could spend $2,000 on an AR and just have iron sights and a few hundred rounds of ammo versus spending $500 or $600 on an AR with a really nice optic, a really nice trigger setup, and some ammunition to train with, I would definitely go with option number 2, because you'll be more effective. The $2,000 AR is not going to make you more effective. So $2,000 ARs are nice if you can afford it, then great. However, don't stress over it. If you're somebody who doesn't have $2,000 up front to spend on an AR-15, then you can definitely buy a Palmetto State Armory or a Smith & Wesson M&P Sport or a Springfield Victor, and you can set it up the way you want over time and really build it out into something that you are proud of. So that's what I'll say about AR-15s, and that's why I think the AR is such a great platform, because you can get into it so expensive nowadays and really have something that works and that is viable, compared to something like the AK platform, where if you buy some of the cheaper AKs, the cast American made AKs, the ones that are around that $600-700 mark, then you may end up with a catastrophic failure, meaning that since they are made out of cast and the sure pressure from that 7.62 by 39 round, with the way that the bolt slams into the trunnion, you may end up with a cracked trunnion, which is something that has happened to me before. I did have a Century Arms RAS 47 pistol, and the front trunnion did end up cracking just over time from me just putting rounds down range. So with the AR, it's much different. You can still buy $500 or $600 ARs, and then you can make them into a more serious platform, or just shoot them the way they are out the box, and they will run, and they are generally reliable and safe as compared to something like the AK platform. So, you know, that's to be said about that. We could talk about scars and things like that, but then you're getting into the like $3,000 price range, which just, in my opinion, is not in the same ballpark. So with that being said, guys, that's what I have to say on this topic. Please leave in the comments below what you think and what type of AR that you run, and if you're one of these people who do need an expensive AR-15, let us know in the comments, and let us know, you know, what you use it for, and you know, what the use case is for it. If you run a cheaper AR-15, let us know how it's treated you, and let us know what brand you prefer, and yeah, let's have a debate. Let's have a conversation in the comments. But for now, guys, that's pretty much it for today. We will have some exciting videos coming up. I will be doing a night vision shooting video. I do have a pair of digital PVS 69s from Von Sure Farms that I've had for quite some time, that we're gonna actually come out here on the range and do some night vision shooting, more than likely with this rifle, since I do have the IR set up on it and everything. And we're really gonna do some cool videos coming up. We also have a Bren 2 video coming up, the pistol, that we will be comparing to the AR-15, since it's kind of the same thing in a different way. So please be prepared for that. Last but not least, guys, a shameless shout out here is our clothing brand. So I do just want to make you guys aware, if you are a Christian and you like to go to the range or go to the gym, or just like tactical style, warrior style clothing, then please check out our clothing brand. It is called the Modern Day Crusader. This is one of our God Soldiers. It's called God Soldier here on the front shirts. This is one of our tactical designs. You got the guy on the front with the night vision goggles. You got the Warrior of God logo on the side, and then on the back you've got the Matthew Bible verse, which says, "Beware of false prophets, sheep's and wolves' clothing," with the tactical soldier and the wolf staring eye to eye with the soldier. So if you're a Christian and you like this style of clothing, please stay tuned for our drop next month in June. We will be releasing it, we'll be announcing it on video, so please subscribe, like, and comment, and stay tuned for that. But that's pretty much all I have today, guys. If you have any questions or anything regarding the build or anything like that, just please leave them in the comments below, and I will see you guys next time.